Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chiara Davalli, and I'm a Senior Project Leader at EBN, European Business Innovation Center Network, one of the partners of the CHERRIES project. So welcome to this fourth and last episode of our webinar series for this 2020. And it has been like a 4 weeks journey into regional healthcare innovation ecosystems. We have been addressing different dimensions of these landscapes, let's say, with different experts, practitioners from different countries, from different indeed backgrounds. And I think that little by little we have been diving into aspects and dimensions that are key in order to shape responsible healthcare ecosystems in Europe. So we have been starting discussing the role of demand-driven and user-led innovation approaches in the healthcare sector. We have been discussing and observing ROI practices in the healthcare sector. Last week, we discussed a bit about the rules and the regulatory framework, so the role of procurement innovation in healthcare. And today we are going to look at the regional dimension and the regional innovation ecosystems for healthcare. And together with me on this session are Gaston Emmerichs and Annette Rozanov. Annette is a project manager at ERIN, the European Regions Research Innovation Network, with a long experience in Horizon 2020 projects, but her expertise is really on the digital transformation of health and care, co-creation, so ROI as a broader approach, and she will be telling indeed about how regions, so how different regional systems are addressing healthcare challenges and are approaching innovation in healthcare. And then we have Gaston with us, who's senior research fellow at CWST, so the Center for Science and Technology Studies at the University of Leiden, one of the partners of CHERRIES project, and is an expert on again regional smart specialization strategies, and we'll hear from him about how regions are coping with global societal challenges. So how these dimensions, territorial dimensions, are finding a balance. Couple of very practical information. We are recording the session, and recordings will be available on our website in a few days, together with the presentations of our speakers. So I invite you to go back to our website later on and check what happened in the past weeks and what's going to happen now today. Please use the chat box you have on the GoToWebinar platform to raise your questions or comments, both during the presentations and after. And just to let you know, we are going to close the session then with some remarks, some like a wrap up, some considerations by our coordinator, Stefan Felix from ZSI. Couple of words about CHERRIES. Not much, but really this series has been, I think, very important for us as a project and also for our community, because it gave us the opportunity to reflect about the challenges that the healthcare systems are facing today in Europe, not only, and how indeed innovation policies, regional innovation policies, can reshape the healthcare systems, ecosystems in Europe. like a picture to tell you that we are about to start our pilots, regional pilots in Örebro, in Murcia, and in the Republic of Cyprus, where we'll be testing RRI driven approaches and to innovation in the healthcare sector. So based on demand-driven approaches and co-creation approaches to innovation. Of course, follow us to know more about the pilots. Okay, I already told you who's going to be with me on this session, actually who's going to intervene today during our discussion. So I stop here and I would give the floor to Gaston Emerix for his talk. I give you. Okay.
Can you see my slides? And you can hear me well? Excellent.
Very good.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to present some of my ideas here. Very much in line with the CHERRIES project. So I'm actually going to present some results already from the CHERRIES project, and also share some kind of ideas about smart specialization and RRI. So the focus of my talk will be about integrating RRI and smart specialization in European regions. I'm also, by the way, in addition to being a research fellow at CWTS, I'm also mostly affiliated with the Copernicus Institute at Utrecht University. Now, what is the issue that I would like to address today? Many regions are struggling to respond to all ongoing transitions, especially in light of all kinds of societal challenges, climate change, migration, digitalization, but also changing economic developments. And why are regions struggling? Because the ability of regions to diversify into new fields, into new activities, and to develop new sustainable growth paths remains very unevenly distributed. So the opportunities that regions have are very different. And why is that? Now, mostly because regional diversification is a process that is characterized by a past and place dependency. So that means that all new activities tend to emerge and develop in a region in fields that are closely related to the activities that are already present in a region. So in order for us to develop new policies and to be able for regions to find new sustainable growth requires also us to understand the territorial diversity that exists out there. And again, it's important to understand that each region has a unique perspective on ongoing global development. So one size does not fit all. Now, what I want to talk about a bit is how regional RRI, responsible research and innovation, that combines also insights from smart specialization, in order to basically recognize the regional community in also defining what RRI means. So we develop an approach, and that is what I want to talk about today, that may assist policymakers in designing and implementing RRIs, smart specialization strategies that are not only smart, so competitive, but also inclusive and sustainable. Now, first a few words on RRI and smart specialization. So both RRI, so responsible research and innovation, and smart specialization share some characteristics. There are some similarities between the concepts. They are both focused on involving a broader set of stakeholders in the development of research and innovation. And likewise, the approaches also increasingly emphasize the need for research and innovation to be oriented towards solving societal challenges. So it has a strong focus often on mission-oriented innovation policies. Another interesting aspect is that both RRI and smart specialization started out as a policy concept rather than a more theoretically motivated framework, like a conceptual framework. So they both responded to clear questions existing in the policy community. There are also some important differences that we want to address here. So smart specialization is traditionally mostly oriented towards competitiveness, to economic activities, and does not fully reflect local preferences and needs. On the other hand, responsible research and innovation basically pays no attention to the spatial dimension of innovation, which is central to the smart specialization approach. So RRI tends to ignore the various ways in which regional context affects the development of innovation, but also the kind of values that are associated with responsible and social innovation. And we know from the innovation literature that innovation processes are very much spatially embedded. There are many processes that have an explicit local dimension, such as knowledge and resources that are available, but also mobility and collaborations all have a strong regional dimension. Now, I want to start with discussing a paper that we published last year on scientific specialization in Europe with colleagues at CWTS. And this basically refers to one of the three dimensions that I want to talk about in this presentation. It's about the knowledge developments that are taking place. Now, smart specialization, for those of you who are not very familiar with the term, was basically a policy concept, an innovation policy concept that is now very dominant in the European policy making for boosting regional science and innovation in order to achieve economic growth, prosperity, and also increasingly it's mission-oriented innovation towards addressing societal challenges. Basically, the idea is that priorities in research and innovation should be made based on the existing strengths that regions have, rather than to spread investments so thinly that they are likely to have no impact in any area. Now, what did we find? Indeed, the regional landscape in Europe in terms of knowledge production is incredibly spiky. So most regions have a very modest amount of publications, while a few regions are real powerhouses in their output. Especially large metropolitan areas are dominant in the rankings of the numbers of publications that are produced. Also in terms of the diversity of the topics, so the diversity of the fields of knowledge that are addressed, we see that the large regions are dominant, and most knowledge production capabilities are concentrated in the traditional EU 15 metropolitan capital areas. Now, we also looked at the complexity of the knowledge base. The complexity is basically a measure for how diverse the knowledge base is in combination with the ability of regions to produce unique knowledge, so knowledge that is not available to other regions. And we see that here there is a very pronounced pattern emerging and that the ability to produce complex knowledge is very much concentrated in Northern Europe. We also see, and this is important for understanding the opportunities for future innovation in regions, that the relatedness very strongly influences the entry of new topics. So basically what this tells us that if new topics are closely related to the existing knowledge base of a region, they are much more likely to be acquired and further developed than where they are unrelated. Now, this is important because this basically gives you a first hint at the strategies that are available for different regions. So in general, especially for regions that are not well developed in terms of their complex knowledge base, it seems important to diversify into related fields to broaden the number of topics that they can cover in order to provide opportunities for also more complex innovations. So basically, to sum up, very skewed distributions are available indeed. So the idea that regions are very different is very well established, and relatedness is an important driver for growth paths and diversification. Now, in the second part of the presentation, and I hear this is also work in the context of CHERRIES by a master's student of mine. He basically, Tim Willemse, he looked at the institutional patterns of regions. So how do the institutions affect knowledge production? So we don't really know how institutions enable and constrain the development of new knowledge. And what we focused on in this part is to see if there are certain patterns. So how the rules and regulations, norms, but also priorities in science basically influence the type of knowledge that can be produced in a region. So they, like the capabilities for knowledge production themselves, every region has its own set of institutions. So here we looked at basically the quality of governance and institutional thickness. So basically, to what extent are knowledge producing actors present, and also the interlinkages that exist in regions. Now, what we see here is that, for example, what is interesting is that in terms of institutional characteristics on the right-hand side, you see that there's a clear pattern of the types of institutions that go together and you see basically two types of regions here that have a more liberal and a more top-down type of governance measures. Now, we also looked at the smart specialization priorities. Most of the priorities that regions selected had a very strong orientation towards grand societal challenges, as you see in the top 10 priority fields. But at the same time, there was a great deal of diversity, as you would expect, if it would accurately reflect the differences in regions. Now, and we found clear indications that knowledge capabilities and institutional features influence the types of strategies that are articulated. Now, finally, and this is work done in CHERRIES, also by Sonia mostly, we see at what are the local opportunities, what are the stakeholders involved, the demands and needs that are articulated. So we spent a lot of time mapping regional stakeholders and finding the policies, which is a very difficult task. So we mobilized a lot of different databases to find indicators for what are the relevant actors, what are the policies, what are the priorities, etc., etc. Now here, for what we now try to do is to bring these insights together. So can we basically combine the top-down perspective of the mapping of knowledge, the topics that are addressed, and link them to the priorities and the needs and expectations of the people, the stakeholders present in the region. So this is work in progress, but we feel that this is a very powerful approach to kind of combine the smart specialization perspective with the opportunities, the regional specific needs and institutions. So in sum, basically, we try to kind of create an interactive process between RRI, what is RRI in a region, what are the topics, who are responsible for innovation, and we try to link them up with the knowledge capabilities, the regional strengths, and the opportunities that are identified for further development. So we think this is a very fruitful approach, recognizing the regional community in defining what RRI means, also kind of moving away from the traditional bias of supply side. So what is the knowledge production side, the business innovation side, and also kind of combine that with the demand side of policies and understand what are the local preferences and what are the local needs. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaston. It was very interesting approach, presenting us points of contact between these two policies, the RRI and the smart specialization, and then also see where they diverge, and therefore how we can reconnect. And indeed, the exercise we are doing in CHERRIES is aimed at feeding this last reflections you were proposing. So I would now give the floor to Annette, and then we move into the Q&A and the debate. So 1 second, I give you the floor. Here we are.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annette Rozanov, and I accepted the kind invitation of Stefan and Chiara to actually sit on the advisory board of CHERRIES on behalf of ERIN, European Regions Research and Innovation Network, as Chiara already introduced it to you. What I will talk about is how innovation ecosystems in healthcare are organized in different territories, and innovation ecosystems are pretty much linked to smart specialization. My presentation will be in line with Gaston's in saying that diversity is almost a must in subnational levels, so in regions and in local levels. Yeah, so I will present to you different models which are all viable and we all need them. I will switch off my camera so that I can concentrate on the presentation. Where I come from is the European Regions Research Innovation Network. As I told you, it's a Brussels-based network of regional authorities mainly, and their Brussels representations. Those all of them are interested, of course, in research, innovation, policies and projects. But ERIN is more flexible than that. We promote the ecosystem approach to research innovation, and we also facilitate that for members through advocacy, policy advocacy, and project development, proposal development. And you will see that this is actually one of the sources of inspiration for this presentation. We represent more than 120 members, regions from more than 20 countries in Europe. What I will talk about is I will guide you through different kind of stages, steps, and discussion points, considerations of ecosystem building. And I explicitly made this slide a bit messy because the multitude of arrows actually represents the interlinkages between these consideration points, starting from the drivers, then moving to the governance, stepping at the visibility, recognition, and sustainability question, which is closely linked to impact, and then ideally internationalizing the whole ecosystem at European or at international level. So what enabled this presentation, as I told you, once is the ERIN's mission, because we promote and facilitate this ecosystem building as and on the right hand side you see one of our position papers, which was written in the light of Horizons Europe, the new research innovation framework program kicking in as of 2021. And its third pillar will focus on innovation ecosystems. So ERIN produced a position paper on that. ERIN is also part of the In-Demand project. I know that you talked about In-Demand as the first session of this series of webinars, where the coordinator Miriam was actually invited. It is just those who didn't hear that, it is co-creation project between ICT companies and healthcare providers, whereby they co-create solutions with the economic support of regional funds. We have learnings from those pilot regions, because all three of them are ERIN members, and also ERIN is responsible for managing the exploitation community, the scale-up community of 12 regions that are equally interested in that model, and the majority of them, one of them is not ERIN member, but majority of them are ERIN members. And the third kind of source of inspiration is are the EIP on AHA reference sites. The European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging is a community that was set up by the Commission in 2012 with two main strands, and one is the more thematic strand on action groups, and the other strand is on reference sites. Reference sites are inspirational ecosystems at subnational level that focus on active and healthy aging solutions for their older population. And ERIN is part of the project, the CSA, that supports the EIP on AHA, actually the second CSA as well. So let's start by the question of what an ecosystem is. By ecosystem, we mean quadruple helix model. You see it's a collaborative place-based initiative that includes government, academia, business, and people. But it is not as easy as that. We cannot say that there is one model, buy it and build it. No, because we will see that for a variety of reasons, we have very different models of this ecosystem. But as I said at the beginning, all of them are viable. What we are interested in the ecosystem is not just having the four components, the four stakeholder types together, but the intensity of the relation and the collaboration between them, because this is what actually makes the ecosystem really working. What we have to accept in an ecosystem is that it's a moving target. It is never a stable, squared, finished product. It is a continuous evolvement. Continuous evolvement in terms of changing priorities, changing actors, objectives, scopes, activities, as the needs demand that, actually. What we also see that you need, these actors need to have a reason why they should collaborate. And for instance, we saw that in in-demand, many regions told that actually we knew each other, we talked to each other, but there was, not a motivational driver to work together. But for instance, the in-demand region gave regions, or regional actors, the reason why they should come together. We also see that seeing quick wins motivates them to move along on the way, so remain together and collaborate. And let's start then the ecosystem building journey by the drivers. So what makes people, stakeholders come together and work together? We see a balance between top-down and bottom-up drivers. So a top-down driver can be a political decision, a strategy, a project, as I told you, as an in-demand project, a European initiative. We heard several and similar to in-demand testimonials from the EIP on AHA reference sites. So for instance, Andalusia said that in their region, it was the EIP on AHA reference site application, because their regions have to apply actually every 3 years to get the award of reference site. So in their region, that was the kind of kickoff driver. But these top-down drivers are balanced by bottom-up. Like in Scotland, for instance, it's true that the main motivation was a political strategy on AHA, on health innovation and AHA, but actors came together, stakeholders came together bottom up, and they said how to implement that strategy. We should talk to each other because we need each other for that. Or a challenge to solve, which is pretty simple, a healthcare challenge like demographic change, like aging, like chronic disease. So for instance, from the reference sites, we heard that from Coimbra, from Portugal and Northern Netherlands, that it started absolutely by bottom up, actors coming together without any governance or government or political push from top down. Once you kicked off the process and you have the drivers, then you have to organize your stakeholders, and you need a governance model for that. In terms of organizing the stakeholders, we see on the scale of formalized agreements and silent agreements, very different models. So it can be really various kind of formalization or making agreements between the different stakeholders. For instance, in the Basque government, we heard that yes, they want signed, formalized memorandum of understanding between the different actors. While in the Northern Netherlands, they absolutely just keep it open, cool, and everyone just based on their roles and competencies fulfill their mission in this ecosystem. What we see is communication and regular meetings is key. Whatever model you apply, it is key. The governance model can be the regional government can take a strong role. We see that very much in the Spanish and in the Italian reference sites, for instance, while independent entities like in Portugal, like in the Netherlands, in Finland, they enjoy more flexibility, they are more agile, they are closer to business, less institutional, what the regional governments the regional government's governance model actually ensures. But if you are flexible, informal, independent entity like a foundation, then you might bump into sustainability issues and the lack of political support. And with that, we get to another consideration point, which is the recognition, visibility, and sustainability. Subnational ecosystems, and I deliberately say subnational because sometimes we cannot talk about regional. It is a mid-level, so they sometimes have the difficulties to reach the national level and raise awareness at national level. If there is no proper autonomous administrative regional system in the country, like in the UK, in Finland, in the Netherlands, in Czech Republic, for instance, or in Hungary, then we cannot talk about really regional ecosystems. And actually, those that cannot really identify themselves with the regional ecosystem notion, we heard like a bit offended comments saying that your narrative is too much fitted to regional ecosystems, and this should change. It should be more inclusive, because actually what we are doing is also very strong, but we are just simply not a region. Or we have to look at if healthcare is a regional competence, like in France. In France, you have very strong regions, Conseil Régional, but the healthcare implementation is not in regional hands. So even if there are regions, proper regions with proper strong competencies, as I said, like in Spain, like in Italy, even they are struggling to get the national recognition, the national awareness of what they are doing. And where it becomes a problem is if they want to scale up what they are doing. So they want to, through national governments, for instance, at European scale, unless they pass through the regional or subnational channels and immediately to European, because they have the opportunities through European projects to come together. They are not really recognized for their strong actions. What helps is if they come together, like at national level, and they form a kind of coordination, create a coordination mechanism between themselves, and then they can represent a much stronger voice towards the national government and through the national government to the European institutions. So this is what I mean by the critical mass hacks. And how they can fight for visibility and recognition, a big role is given to impact. When they can prove societal, economic, well-being, policy, etc. impacts of what they are doing, then of course it is much easier, and also measurable impact, it's much easier to argue for their right of existence, right, the raison d'être. But for impact, what you need is scale. So with pilots, it is more difficult to argue for impact, right? So you need to get to the market. For that, what you need, and if you didn't get, it didn't get to your awareness yet, or you didn't realize yet the importance of ecosystems, then this is the latest moment when you get to the point that you need it. When you want to get to the market, you need investment, you need ecosystems, and investments can come from ASIF funds, through smart specialization. So this is where smart specialization also comes to the picture. PPIs, I know that you talked about public procurement for innovation, but this is an important and powerful tool. So the regional, the public authorities play a role in helping these ecosystems to produce impact and to get recognition and visibility. Most probably, they could use health technology assessment, HTA, or other objective measurement tools. Actually, regions can have a say in HTA, so they can foster or hinder certain innovations. What you need to really produce impact is clear messages, probably use networks, associations for dissemination, and as I said, it is an important feedback loop to sustainability, visibility, and recognition. And then we get to the internationalization phase. We talk about healthcare ecosystems only, but many other ecosystems can exist in the region or in subnational level, so in territories. They can actually create an ecosystem of ecosystems. So healthcare is not an isolated sector. It is cross-sectoral, so probably they could link up to other ecosystems, like in environment, in energy, etc. Also, European networks, partnerships like S3 partnerships can help creating inter-regional value chains, also foster exchange, projects, sharing, etc. We would like to emphasize, of course, being a Brussels-based network and working with Brussels-based offices, the involvement of the Brussels-based offices in the creation and the promotion of the ecosystems. And we can go further than just European, and we can go to international spheres, and then again, networks, exchange, projects, and sharing. And with that, I would like to actually thank you for listening to the presentation, and open now to questions.
Thank you very much, Annette. I like very much that to see that over the different episodes there were some recurrent themes and topics and messages that you all sent to the audience. I don't know if you emailed each other without letting me know, but so for example, Annette, you was stressing the point on the importance of communication among stakeholders and different players at regional level, but then also between the different territorial units. And this aspect has been very, I mean, this topic has been recurrent during this series of webinars. I think that this is definitely something we'll be building upon, understanding how this communication can be fostered, and it was very interesting to see how this applies indeed, for example, to the ecosystemic dimension you were mentioning now, to the regulatory framework. So also there depends on communication, the complexity of healthcare ecosystems that require again communication between the community building blocks, let's say, and again the communication between demand and supply. So yes, so it was really, I don't know, there were very interesting elements that were kind of recurrent during our conversations. I don't see any questions for the moment in our chat. So I would, I have one. So
I cannot hear you.
Back, right?
Yeah, yes, now we were back.
Okay. Okay, so well, you were these let's say how it is important at a certain point to move from the pilot to the scaling dimension in order to, can you hear me?
Now we can.
From pilot, can you? We're mentioning indeed this transition. Okay, this transition, let's say, from pilot to the scaling of impact in order to demonstrate the impact an ecosystem is generating. Actually, I wanted to ask you, as you are part of indeed an international network, and you are also part of in-demand projects, the HAHA initiative. So how regions can build on these international connections to scale impact, to connect with peers?
Absolutely. So this is why I said the networks. Networks help a lot. As I told you, that they have to kind of pass by their own peers. So in a regional or subnational network, you can find your friends. So scale up between regions. And for instance, there is this twinning tool, which is widely used by other projects, so in EIP on AHA as well, but in other projects as well, where you can scale up to different extent. So it can be only just knowledge exchange, preparing a plan, how it can be done. So it's one stage. Then it can be partial adoption or full adoption. So indeed, initiatives and networks aim to help regions and the members to scale up their products, their services, their knowledge. Yeah. We lost perhaps
Okay,
Chiara?
thank you.
Or no, you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, we received a question. So maybe Gaston, you can take. You can start, and then Annette can continue. So how can a region decide if they should specialize or diversify in a given sector or knowledge domain? And what are the dimensions that could help actors to understand their potentials?
It's a very good and very difficult question. I think part of the problem is that smart specialization is a bit of an unfortunate phrase, because I think that smart specialization is not about specialization, but about diversification. So I once proposed to change this phrase to daring diversification. So it's about exploring new opportunities, and these opportunities are constrained to a large extent by what a region already can do. So that is the starting point of the smart specialization approach. So it's unlikely that a lagging region would from scratch develop a center of excellence in nanotechnology or in the pharmaceutical industry. So that is the rationale of the smart specialization strategy. But it's not about specialization per se. So it's not, there's no value in itself in being specialized. On the contrary, it's better to diversify, but this diversification is constrained by the existing opportunities. So that, but the other part of the question is actually a very interesting and difficult one. And I think that is one that we are doing in the CHERRIES project. So I think there's a broad understanding about the type of approaches that are needed. But that's so about diversification, mission-oriented research, including the demand side, stakeholder involvement. And that's also what I heard in Annette's presentation, that we are struggling with understanding the governance mechanisms that are associated with these processes. And another way to answer your question is then we are trying to also develop the type of combination of different approaches, both bottom-up supply side approaches and demand side approaches. And we think that in the combination, there's a lot of to be gained in terms of governance information. So I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Thank you. Thank you, Gaston. Annette, do you want to add something to this? Otherwise, there is another question that is addressed to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking that actually, indeed, the region decides. So it is a collective decision, because indeed, smart specialization, as I said, it's very much linked to ecosystems, right? Because it starts with the entrepreneurial discovery process. So it brings actors together. So it's a collective decision: is what can we do and what shall we specialize in, and how shall we different from how shall we be different from other regions. So it is not like one actor deciding, but it's an ecosystem decision ideally. Yes, the question that is coming to me.
Any best practices to share on how local actors can commit or get engaged in the viability of solutions? So I think within indeed local ecosystems.
Viability of solutions, what do we mean by that?
I guess it is about sustainability, so solutions to, for example, health related needs, how they can so solutions coming up through co-creation processes and so on, how they can be adopted in the region. Let's see if I interpreted it the right way. I see they
so by solutions,
solutions, financial support, sustainability, and adoption of innovative solutions coming up from, for example, co-creation projects or co-creation approaches in healthcare, for example.
Yeah, I would say indeed we discussed about scaling, and so how you build a kind of logical steps and moving forward with a need, with an idea that you have in the territory. And we had a good example, for instance, from Liguria, where they experienced the need for a new profile of carer, for instance. And then what they did was they called it family and community nurses. And then what they did was second step. Well, now I have to think it over how it went. But I really like that these kind of building up. They did pilot tests. So indeed, that was a project that they built this idea into a project. They tested it, validated it, and then when they got the results, they passed a legal decree, a legal process where they acknowledged as new professionals, and then they if by degree they have to have per X number of inhabitants, X number of these nurses. And then they will engage the university, who will set up the curriculum for the training of these nurses. So I think that this is a kind of good example. I don't know if it answers our attendees question, but I think that this is an example how different actors come together for the success and for the scalability and sustainability of a solution. Well, it was a profile, but it can be any other solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, an interesting case, actually, I must say. So thanks for sharing. And we have a third question, and then another one I'm going to copy paste here in a while. So speaking about, you spoke a lot about networks and actors in terms of regional ecosystems, but how do you assess the role of agency, negotiation, and asymmetric power relations on the regional level? I think the example helps. So for example, conflicting interests and how to mediate them. So ideally they all go very well along, and
yes.
but how
so, Gaston, or
I think who want to take it?
Would you like to start, and then I chip in, or?
It seems to me a question to you, Annette, but
indeed, but I
can go ahead, Annette. I think it's your question.
Yeah, it is indeed an ideal situation when there are no conflicting interests. And this is why we were discussing about the agreements. Do you need agreements between partners and how to mediate conflicting interests. But actually, nobody, so we asked the question, nobody really reported on seriously conflicting interests in ecosystem building. So they can agree, I think, on a bottom line at least, to a common interest. And after that, of course, the different commercial or political interests indeed play a role. The agency, by the agency, we mean development agency or innovation agency, or because those come to public sector. So indeed, indeed, it is an issue. But to be honest, I didn't get any solution or any honest answer to that. Perhaps partners don't want to talk about that. I don't know. Gaston, what did you want to say, add?
Yeah, I think it relates also to the fourth question that I see. So the critical issues about how do you really involve civil society in the discussion. So yeah, that's a very difficult question. So I think the question is also, okay, so sort of I think the quadruple helix was mentioned, and some people argue that you need, so a triple helix is sufficient because people are also voters, they are also consumers, and they are also but of course the question is about what demands and needs are not articulated in this triple helix discourse, and how do you kind of and I think that is the RRI component, and this is also refers to the governance mechanisms that I mentioned. So I think that there is a broad agreement about the potential for this involvement, but that we don't yet have the tools available to kind of include the needs and demands that are out there, that we are so that's why I also think that this type of work we are doing in the CHERRIES project is it could be an important step towards better understanding here. So, and of course, and that is also what the previous question refers to, there is not one kind of uniform needs out there. There are different communities and different stakeholders which have very different needs, and sometimes they are conflicting even, they're opposite. So that is also something that you need to take into account.
And all that comes to, I think, that to solid methodologies and relation and conflict management and empowerment, I would say that's really key. And also to the civil society, perhaps they need the strongest support to express themselves, because they might be the less organized. As Gaston said, indeed, you are also a citizen, but it depends what hat you put on. So you are a researcher, you are a citizen, you are a family, a father, and so different hats, and then different interests will motivate you. Purely civil society, indeed, perhaps we can talk about patience. A lot of people don't like talking about patience, because patience would say that you have already a problem. But as a citizen, why not? If we talk about prevention, you don't have to have anything. We are preventing it so that you become a patient. But indeed, we need them on board, or at least representing that need and that role, even if we don't have them as an association or an organized format. But we need them, and we need to empower them. And yeah, I think a lot of kind of communication and conflict management methodologies and co-creation methodologies, I think. And this is how you can reconcile different interests.
Thank you both for your answers, your inputs. I was taking some notes. It was very good to have you on this discussion today. So to close this session, but also this first webinar series, CHERRIES project, I would now give the floor to Stefan. And hopefully, indeed, next year we'll run another webinar series and we'll be able to advance a bit some of the reflections started this year with this series. And of course, I hope to see you both, Annette and Gaston, in future conversations. I would really thank you very much for your contribution today on my side. And now I give the floor to Stefan.
Hey. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank Annette and Gaston for your time here. But as is my role now to wrap up not only today's webinar, but the whole series, I would also like to thank all the speakers that were guiding us through a very interesting journey over the last 4 weeks. We were discussing different aspects of healthcare innovation ecosystems, starting from the role of need and open user-led innovations, where a colleague of Gaston, Walter Boone, spoke about the demand side and user innovation policies, discussing the challenges that come along with this, at least when we talk about the open user-led innovations or more modern approaches to innovation policy making, that are really at the core of CHERRIES, what we're trying to experiment with, what we try to understand better, or what we try to introduce into regional policy making. That is like, how can we facilitate demand articulation processes? How can we co-create solutions that really fit the needs of the stakeholders who bring those needs forward? And then how can we institutionalize them in order not have a pilot that is then ending in the famous valley of the death, where too many innovations end because they are not able to establish themselves on the market. Miriam Martin from DigbUmed, who is a partner in CHERRIES and the coordinator of In-Demand project that is really very close, or a little bit like the bigger sister of CHERRIES, was sharing the experiences that they made in this project and said, okay, it's really really important that you establish an innovation culture in the ecosystems that are addressed, in organizations that are addressed, that you establish bottom-up processes of this need identification. But it's at the same time really a challenge to adopt the solutions that are developed there. So that's really something that we will need to talk about. And because we knew already that this challenge with adoption is really crucial, we were talking about, and I'm jumping a little bit in the third week, about public procurement. What is actually the framework and what is the potential of public organizations buying innovative solutions? What are they actually buying and how can they buy it? John Rigby shared some observations of the importance of context here, stressing also like that we cannot look at supply side policy or demand side policy isolated, because it's a little bit like a conversation or as a tennis match. I think he used this picture. I really liked it a lot that he was saying supply and demand are like tennis. It goes back and forth. Yeah, and of course it's that the innovation is always happening in a very specific context, and I think that's really also very, very important when we say, okay, we look at the regional level. Each region is having a very specific context, and the healthcare sector is again also a really specific context. And John was questioning if we talk about a healthcare innovation system, because it says it's a little bit more like a jungle out there than a clear system. Samuel Kaupinen from the Oulu University Hospital was sharing his experiences with public procurement and from a hospital perspective, how they are struggling with these processes and how they are dealing with all these challenges when they're still establishing their routines there. And his key message that he really wanted to hammer down to us is communication between the procurer and the market actors is central. The procurers don't necessarily know what kind of solutions are out there. If they want to know what's already out there, they need to talk with people. And if they find out that it's not there, then they can really start this procurement for innovation. And this is a completely different process than just buying a fixed solution there. Yeah? And in the second week, if I go back to that, we were talking about the potential that RRI holds in healthcare. And I think that there's actually really a lot of potential there. And Rosina Malagrida was really like illustrating how RRI, but also other approaches like open innovation and systems thinking and all these kind of things that are developing can contribute to manage the complexity of this sector. And that it's really like we need to change the relationship between the R&I stakeholders if we want to transform these sectors. And Barbara Kieslinger, my colleague here at the Center for Social Innovation, was showing an example of really bottom-up processes that maker communities start with really singular innovation needs, people who have problems with their walking sticks and so on, and they need another handle, and people who are really like developing them for them, and then make the design open, share it on the internet, so everybody can approach, use it and reuse it and adopt it to their own needs, and that there is culture evolving that might have really consequences for how we deal with these kind of things in the future. And that brings me to the last week, which was the day talking about the regional aspects, about again the different regional context, and that every region is really kind of unique in their knowledge factors, in the specialization patterns, and in the potentials that they have for future development, and that it's shaping policy and innovation frameworks, and that the linkages in the regions are often really crucial for that. And that these linkages, they might exist, like Annette stressed, but only knowing each other is not enough when there is not a reason to collaborate. And I think we need to do kind of increase the reasons to collaborate within regions if we want to address the challenges that the healthcare sector is facing. Yeah? And if I want to sum up those four weeks now, I think there are some key messages. First of all, healthcare is an extremely complex sector, jungle, as John described it. Historically, the supply side has been dominating the sector. And when we want to open it up, looking at the demand side and then having a more need and demand orientation is a very promising approach. At the same time, I mean, healthcare is an extremely important societal function. It's one of the central achievements of the modern European welfare state, and it's under extreme pressure. It has been under pressure for some decades now, but aging societies, chronic illnesses, comorbidities, personalized medicine, increasing demands from patients. They want more personalized, more personal treatments than they used to get. Goes hand in hand with exploding costs, and this is creating issues in many European societies. So innovation holds somehow the promise that it could help us in addressing these issues, but at the same time, we probably need new approaches, new ways of dealing with innovation if we want to fulfill this promise. Central in all presentations, I think it was really in every single presentation, was the aspect of communication. So if we want to need to open up processes and translate between the different stakeholder groups, we need to improve the communication processes and the information flows somehow. Yeah? And I think the ecosystem approach of CHERRIES is helpful in this regard. We will try to establish regional networks, change the culture of exchange, open up, have transparent processes of need articulation, to help actors to be reflexive about their activities and about the impact of their activities, and hope that we will be able to sustainably transform these sectors towards a more sustainable setting in the future. And of course, we will try to anchor these approaches also in regional policy making. And last but not least, I really want to thank this webinar series. We have recorded them. They will be all available. Is a really great resource for all the future work that we're doing here in CHERRIES. One of the things that we will do later on is establish a community of regions with mirrors and other practitioners that are experimenting with similar approaches. And I think these webinars now give a really good overview of our understanding of these processes, what kind of challenges and what kind of solutions are already out there, and where they can start if they want to experiment with similar processes. Yeah. And that would be my wrap up about the last 4 weeks, which I enjoyed a lot. Again, I really would like to thank everyone who was part of it, especially all the speakers, but also the people who were listening to us and were posting the questions. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to keep this discussion going in the coming weeks, years.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefan. Nothing to add on my side. So I would now close the session, and Annette, Gaston, if you want to say something, you have the floor. So
looking forward to 2021 and the new series.
Great. Super. Okay, so wonderful. So see you all in 2021 with the next webinar series. But before, please stay in touch, checking our website, subscribing our newsletter, and monitoring our social media. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.